My wife hid that she's asexual. I asked for a divorce, she refused, and even tried to open the relationship by offering her best friend to me. My wife 29th, and I 34 have been married for 4 years, and up until a year and a half ago things were fantastic. Our marriage began to deteriorate after there was a significant drop in sex between us, not intimacy, just the actual sex part of the relationship. We would still cuddle and have deep, intimate moments talking and just being around each other, but now we've had no problem communicating, so I made sure to address it early and we talked and made adjustments. We both made sure to stay in shape, tried being more adventurous, went to couples therapy, did counseling, and even tested both of our hormone levels. Everything came back normal. Each solution would work for a little while, and then we'd be back to having sex maybe once a month. I asked her several times if she was no longer attracted to me, to which she denied every time. I also asked if I was falling short in any other way in the relationship. Well, about a month ago, she came back from her therapy session and told me that she believes she's asexual and that's the reason for her libido being non-existent as of late. I was definitely confused because we had such great sex for a while in the beginning of our relationship. Obviously, I'm not going to force her to have sex, so we had a long conversation about our relationship. I say I because she immediately rejected the idea and said we would figure something out and wouldn't talk to me about it anymore. I didn't know what to say, so I dropped it. 3 weeks went by without sex, and I decided that I had to do this for my own mental well-being, so I filed for divorce and had her served with the papers last week. When I got home from work, she was going about the day like nothing was wrong. I asked her if she signed the papers, and she flat out said, "We are not getting a divorce," and changed the subject, acting like things were normal. Obviously, I thought this was crazy, so I stopped her and said I couldn't be in a marriage devoid of sex. I also mentioned that I was being incredibly fair with the divorce. She could keep the house that we bought and paid for with cash. I only wanted to keep my sports car. Thankfully, we don't have kids. I love her and want her to be comfortable, and I have no problem starting over since I make a good income. This brings us to 2 days ago. I get home and go to our bedroom, where I find my wife's friend 27th in our bed naked. I immediately shut the door, said sorry, and went looking for my wife. I found her in the kitchen and asked what her friend was doing here. She said that her friend was here for me. I put two and two together and said that I'm not having sex with other women in place of the woman I chose to marry. She was adamant, saying that I could sleep with her whenever I wanted and that her friend agreed to it. I couldn't believe things would get this far, so I went back to our bedroom and asked her friend to leave. I packed a bag and have been staying in a hotel nearby since that night. My wife, her mother, and her sister keep calling me, but I'm just not interested in hearing what they have to say. This feels like a trick. I just want this whole thing to be over. Does anyone have advice? Is this some kind of ploy for alimony? We do have a prenup. Should I just contact my lawyer and try to force the divorce? I'm really uncomfortable with this entire situation. Here's the update if anyone's interested. I'll try to keep this as concise as possible. I feel overwhelmed, so I probably won't bother with another update after this one. My wife came to my hotel last night and we talked about everything. She told me the full truth about what's going on in her mind. A few of you commented on this in the last post, and you were right. She has always been asexual. She and her whole family have known this since she was 16. Apparently, this is the reason her last long-term relationship of 3 years ended. He broke up with her after the sex between them diminished to non-existence after the first year. She told me that sex is easier for her in the beginning when emotions are running high, but she still needs to force herself to have it. I knew they broke up due to unresolvable differences, but I didn't ask for details, nor did she tell me. After a lot of apologies and crying, she told me that I was the first person she was able to tolerate sex with for so long, and that she did enjoy it a handful of times, but after a while she still felt like she was being raped. I broke down after hearing this and started kicking myself. She said she tried her best to please me as much as she could. She still doesn't want a divorce and doesn't want the house cars or savings. She just wants me and is ready to do whatever it takes to keep me. She even said she would sign a postnup stating this. As for her friend, she was there during her last breakup. My wife went to her after I brought up divorce and talked things out. Her friend suggested opening the relationship for me, but she said she didn't want me sleeping with strangers, so her friend volunteered to be the one who sleeps with me. My wife thought this was a great idea, which led to the fiasco at our house. I won't comment on her appearance because it doesn't matter, and I don't blame the friend. My lawyer got back to me, and you were all right, I don't need her permission, but I will have to wait if I want to push it through. I asked her why she lied to me this entire time, and she said she was tired of being rejected after revealing she was asexual, so she convinced herself that she would be able to force herself to have sex during the relationship. The hormone tests, therapy sessions, and all of our solutions were just her buying time to find another way around sex or give herself enough time to build up the strength to start regularly having sex with me again. Our conversation ended with us holding each other in bed, crying for a couple of hours no, we didn't have sex. She pleaded with me to hold off on the divorce and look for a solution together, and she left my hotel room. I'm now sitting alone typing this post. I guess I found out that we don't share everything with each other. Thank you to everyone who has messaged me directly. I'm still trying to get to all of them. I don't know what I'm going to do. Months passed since my ex-wife, and I made the painful decision to divorce. The finalization came with its share of emotional turmoil, but I felt a sense of relief that at least it was over. After all the long discussions, the tears and the endless back and forth, I could finally breathe again. But it wasn't without its complications. I moved back to my home state, closer to my family, hoping that the distance would provide me some much-needed space to process everything. The house we had once shared was sold. I gave her the larger share of the proceeds, as I always wanted, to make sure she was comfortable, even after everything that had happened. She had been struggling, especially emotionally, but that wasn't my responsibility anymore. She was now living with her parents, and I had no way of knowing how she was coping. I thought I could move on quickly, but the truth is I was numb. The whole experience had drained me emotionally, and I found myself trying to occupy my mind with anything to distract from the overwhelming weight of it all. I threw myself into working out, trying to keep my body and mind active, even though it felt like nothing really helped. At night, I'd resort to smoking pot to relax and fall asleep. It wasn't healthy, but I didn't know how else to cope with the void left by the entire relationship. One evening, as I was scrolling through social media, I received an email from my ex-wife's dad. It was brief, but it felt like a lifeline from a place of compassion that I hadn't expected. He was asking how I was doing. There was no bitterness in his words, only genuine care. We had exchanged pleasantries before, but this felt different. It felt like he was reaching out to make sure I was okay. I took a deep breath and responded, telling him that I was doing as well as could be expected, given everything that had happened. To my surprise, he replied a few days later, saying that my ex had checked into a mental health clinic. Apparently, she had been struggling since the divorce was finalized, but had refused to speak openly about it to me. He explained that she was getting help, and although she hadn't shared much with him, he felt like she was making progress. I wasn't sure how to feel about that. Part of me felt sad, and another part of me felt distant, like the woman I married was gone. But I was also reminded of the love I had once felt for her and the pain of watching her unravel from afar. As the months continued, I thought about everything our relationship. It was a strange mix of grief and relief, because even though I knew the marriage wasn't right, for either of us the emotional scars remained. I started going out more with friends, trying to find a new sense of normal. It was hard to avoid the topic of my divorce, especially when I ran into people I hadn't seen in a while. They would always ask how she was doing, and that would always bring me back to her. I started distancing myself from mutual friends, unsure of how to explain everything without sounding like I was holding on to the past. Then, about 6 months after the divorce, I heard from my ex's father again. This time the message was more specific. He asked me if I would be willing to meet with my ex. She had been through a lot in the mental health clinic, and she had apparently made significant strides in her recovery. Her father said she had expressed wanting closure, and while I didn't know what that meant, I figured I owed it to myself and to her to at least listen. I agreed, though I wasn't sure if I was ready. When we met, my ex-wife seemed like a different person. The sadness in her eyes was still there, but it wasn't as overwhelming as it had been before. She looked healthier, calmer. We spoke for hours that day about everything we hadn't said during the divorce process. She admitted that she had never fully come to terms with her asexuality, and that her fear of losing me had pushed her into hiding the truth from me. She explained that even though she felt no sexual attraction, I could see the pain in her eyes as she spoke. I felt sympathy, but also anger that she had lied to me for so long. She apologized over and over, saying that she had no idea how to deal with her own feelings and didn't know how to make sense of the complexity of her emotions. The truth was she had been terrified of losing me, and instead of facing her truth, she had let the lies spiral until it tore us apart. I told her I was sorry too. Sorry that I hadn't understood the depth of her struggles, sorry that I had let the lack of physical intimacy create such a rift in our relationship. But at the same time, I told her I couldn't go back. I couldn't give up the freedom I had found in being my own person again, in making decisions for myself, without worrying about her needs that I couldn't fulfill. There was a sense of finality in that conversation, and yet a part of me still held onto something, maybe not hope, but some lingering affection. She thanked me for everything, for being kind and fair throughout the entire ordeal, and we parted ways with no ill will, but a heavy understanding that we were both better off apart. Since that conversation I've kept to myself mostly. I've made progress in my personal life, though I still struggle with feelings of isolation and guilt. I've started therapy to help me process everything because the truth is, I can't fully let go of the past without understanding how it all fits into my future. It's been a long journey, and I know it will continue for a while. There are days when I think back on the love we shared, and other days when I wonder if it was ever truly enough. My ex-wife is still living with her parents. I haven't heard much about her since our meeting. I assume she's still working on herself, and I truly hope she finds peace. As for me, I'm focusing on rebuilding, reconnecting with old friends, building a new career path, and figuring out what makes me happy outside of a relationship. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I'm slowly learning to trust myself again. I'm not afraid of being alone anymore. I've learned that sometimes letting go is the healthiest choice you can make for yourself. And while I'll always have love and respect for the person I married, I know that moving forward is the only way to truly heal. As for my ex, I genuinely wish her the best. She deserves happiness and peace, even if that's not with me. We were two people who tried, but sometimes love just isn't enough. It's been almost a year since my divorce was finalized, and as I sit here reflecting on everything, I can honestly say I've come a long way. The constant weight of the past still lingers, but I've finally started to find peace with it all. After our last conversation, my ex-wife and I haven't spoken much. I don't know much about her life now, though I did get an email from her dad a few months back. He said that she was doing well and that she had really thrown herself into her recovery. I was relieved to hear that, though at the same time it felt like a distant echo of the person I once knew. I wish her all the best, but I don't need any more updates. I've learned that there's no real value in continuing to look back when I'm trying to move forward. As for me, things are looking up. I've made some big changes in my life. I took some time to travel and reconnect with myself. It was the first time I'd done something just for me in a long while, and it gave me clarity I hadn't even realized I needed. I've met a few new people, but nothing serious yet. I'm not rushing into anything. I want to make sure that whatever I pursue next is something healthy and right for me. For the first time in a long time, I feel in control of my own happiness. I've started taking up new hobbies, things I never would have had the time or energy to enjoy during my marriage. There's a sense of freedom in rediscovering who I am without the weight of someone else's expectations. I've also made a conscious effort to stay connected with my family. I've been a little more present, and that's been really healing. The guilt I felt for so long, guilt over leaving, over not being able to fix things, over not fully understanding her struggles, has mostly faded. I understand now that we both were caught in our own versions of what we needed from each other, but we couldn't give those things. And that's okay. Sometimes two people just aren't right for each other no matter how much love is there. I haven't heard from her in months. I assume she's still living with her parents. I hope she's found peace, and I genuinely hope she's working toward being happy in her own way. I no longer feel resentment, only understanding. We both went through so much, and while we couldn't make it work, I believe we both learned something vital about ourselves in the process. I don't know what the future holds. I can't predict what's coming next. But I know I'm stronger now. I've learned more about my own needs, boundaries, and what I truly want out of a relationship. I'm not in a rush to find someone else, but I'm open to it when the time is right. I'm focusing on being the best version of myself, whatever that may look like. So this is the end of the story. It wasn't an easy chapter in my life. I'm grateful for the lessons learned, and while the pain will always be part of me, it no longer defines me. Thank you to everyone who offered advice, support, and a listening ear throughout this journey. I'll carry that kindness with me as I continue to move forward.